This is Global Tellink. You have a prepaid call from
Jarvis.
An inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tellink.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Solnit. I'm here with David Sheff, author of Beautiful Boy and the forthcoming The Buddhist on Death Row, to talk about that latter book on city arts and lectures. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to be with you, and I'm so excited to talk to David about this completely amazing book I got to read in advance. Hello, David, and hello, Jarvis, special guest, subject of the book, subject of the conversation, star of the conversation, phoning in from Death Row, San Quentin, California, to talk to us himself instead of the two of us talking about him. How you doing, Jarvis? What are you thinking about right now?
I'm thinking about being here with you guys and being able to share some of my stories and share some of my time and just hang out with you guys for a minute.
Oh, I hope it's several minutes. I'm wondering if we should be really organized and try and tell some of your story now. But I also want to acknowledge this is an incredible historic moment for addressing racism and racial injustice and trying to rectify it. And I know you've been really involved in that too. And I feel like your story is part of this bigger story. But maybe we should start with who you are and why you're there and work our way up to this moment in history.
My history goes back a long, long way of being in and out of institutions. And I think David wrote a lot about that. And I think he was someone that I trusted enough to share those stories with. So he definitely has those stories in his book. So I guess he can speak more to those.
I can't speak more to those than you can. I guess I'll just say that, Rebecca, you mentioned what's going on in the world now, since the murder of George Floyd, and we've all been affected by it. It's sort of, it's woken us up, the horror. And, Jarvis, you talked to me about growing up in the really quick version of the story is that you grow up with this loving mother who also was unable to really be the mom that she wanted to be and that you needed. She was addicted, and as you grew older, you were removed from your home, put into the foster care system, and then into the juvenile justice system. And as you once said to me, the juvenile justice system is really youth on its way to prison system. I've read the case, I've read the transcript of your trials, and I would say that you are a victim of this same institutional racism that we're seeing all the time. That's not the full story. The full story is, you ended up in San Quentin, but you've done, what you also once told me that, people in San Quentin basically who get either life sentences or get on death row, the choices are pretty much, they go crazy, they go insane, they become bitter and angry, or they kill themselves. And you went a different way, and that is so. Really, that's why I feel like your story is remarkable and it's inspiring. And we spent an awful lot of time together over the last years. I told you at the beginning that we'd have this finished up. I'd have my book finished up in a year and a half. It's 5 years later. You won the bet. But you've had a big impact on my life, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for our friendship. I feel like you're a part of our family.
And I truly appreciate that, David. And a lot of my stories that are so reflective to a lot of people I see here on death row. And that's why I am able to really relate to people, because we share the same stories. And in my book, Finding Freedom, I try to capture a lot of those stories. And I've been able to make a lot of friendships, sharing people's stories and developing a better understanding why, so many people are caught into the system. I'm not just the only one, and we all know that, but how we were treated, as young people, and how we end up in the system is a true reflection of what's going on in these later years in the 2000s. And I'm so glad that I was able to sit down with you and also sit down with Rebecca, and we talk about a lot of things that reflects my life that might be of benefit to a lot of other people out there. So as long as I'm doing that, I feel like I have a purpose, whether I'm in here or out there or wherever. And I live for those challenging times to stay strong and look at my case from a situation that I have a chance. I have, if not that, I have a chance to still grow and develop and help people and do all the things necessary to make me feel whole and safe and secured in my way of growing up in a place like this, So it's hard, it's challenging, but, it's either you don't go backwards or you don't go forwards. I'm always constantly trying to figure out how I can, be a more productive person in here for the people that communicate with me out there. And I try to make it work,
And you do make it work.
That's basically it. I was just responding to some of the things that David said in the book, and I thought that it was just better for me to just reflect on where I'm at now as well, So I just wanted to share that.
Jarvis, for me, rereading the book is just
This
so
call
remarkable.
and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
There's that lady again.
She's interrupting me again.
But go ahead.
I guess what I was going to say before the automated recording of the prison phone system interrupted us was rereading David's book. One of the things that's so striking to me is meeting, as I did in Melody's book, as I did in your memoir, That Bird Has My Wings, this really tough young guy who'd been through so many intense, difficult things. And this guy I'll never meet because, Melody came into your life as the investigator on your team for your trial for this murder, for being an accessory to this murder. And helped you find your way to Buddhism, and you really kind of turned a corner in this extraordinary way, which is a lot of what David's book is about. And I wonder if the two of you could maybe talk some about what Melody did, and Jarvis, why it really clicked for you, and what that path was that you found yourself on in the middle of just the worst situation you could possibly be in.
Go for it, Jarvis.
Well, when I met Melody, it was in the early 80s, and I was in a lot of trouble because I was charged with a murder that I was not involved with, and I was someone who was just an angry person. I was really angry. I was angry at the system, and I was angry at a lot of mistakes I did that I made, and I wasn't thinking right. I was out of control. A lot of crimes I did, the robberies I'm particularly talking about, and I was out of control. So when Melody met me, I was a very, very wannabe tough guy, 21, 22 years old, and I'm in a prison system with, everyone here old enough to be my fathers or uncles or someone of an elder. And Melody met me with my beanie hanging down over my eyes and this way of not paying attention to her or anyone else. And slowly we start talking about what was going on in my history, and slowly I began to trust her, and slowly was she saying to me I had a story to write about, and she put that pencil and paper in front of me and asked me to just give my memories to paper. And from there, she taught me how to sit with those stories and to sit with a lot of things that was going on. And it was all about, where was the child at in me, and where was the younger man that was trying to come from me. And it was a process. It was a process of trusting Melody, and it was a process of trusting myself, and it was a process of what I was going to write about, what I really wanted to say, what was I ready to confront with who I was. And one of those first stories were a story called Scars, and it reflected on all the scars of people
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I seen on the backs of a lot of guys that I had a lot of respect for. And those scars were like, Melody, everybody out there got scars on them, whips on them. And she said, why don't you write about that, and talk to the guys about it. And I was allowed to do it. And I was surprised that story really gave me a chance to feel like I had other stories to talk about. And she was there for me to write those stories. So she was a very, very big help to me,
She's how I came to know you. I found her book Altars in the Streets. That had a huge influence on me, kind of sending me towards Buddhism, but also sending me towards you. She's why I came to, knew that you were there when I started being, hanging around rowing on the water near San Quentin, and decided that I needed to talk to you and write about you. So she's such a generative figure. Don't know if you're still there or if they disconnected you. But
I guess I was just going to say, it's really interesting that you just talked about rowing. I read your piece in Harper's. It was amazing. And you talked about looking at the prison from the bay, going out rowing in the bay. And I had my introduction earlier, I was talking a little bit about it, but my introduction actually, even thinking about the fact that we live in this amazing place, the San Francisco Bay Area, and there is this institution on the edge of the bay where about 4,200, I believe it is right now, 4,200 men are incarcerated, 737 men are on death row, but I never thought about it.
This is
My
Global
daughter,
Starlink. You have a prepaid call
here it
from
is.
Here we go.
an inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel-Link.
Hey.
Welcome back, Jarvis. Everybody out there in Radio Land, the prison telephone system only lets them talk in 15-minute increments. Not only is your space regimented, but your time is regimented and intruded upon, and how you're allowed to talk to the outside world. So this is how all his conversations have gone. This is how this conversation you're part of is going to go. So, Jarvis, if you want to just pick up where you left off, you were talking about Melody, about writing about the Scars essay. That was kind of how the writing started, and you found and it's interesting, I never really thought about the fact that Melody helped you find your way as both a Buddhist and as a writer, and how connected those things are.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like the word Buddhism when I first heard it. I thought it was, very, very philosophically not about prison. It wasn't part of the prison culture, and I didn't want to get close. I didn't want to get close to it, right? When you go around telling everybody you're Buddhist, it's almost like going around telling everybody to stab you, and that, so it just didn't feel right to be able to start that kind of relationship to Buddhism. So and I think she understood that. She understood the culture. So we just talked about meditation, just sitting down, hearing our thoughts, learning how to breathe, learning how to relax. And we did it right there in front of, in the visiting room, in the legal visiting room. And she helped me take that back to my cell. And it was a very, very tough time, because I I was turning a corner, and turning that corner was not an easy thing to do, So eventually I did, and I'm not sure how I did it. Well, I mean, you go from one kind of person to you go from one kind of person to the next, and making that transition is very, very hard because all it is a lot of self-confronting, Why were you abused? Why were you taken away from your mother? What sense did that make for that to happen, and where are you at in relationship to all those things? So that was, I can go on and on and on, but that was hard to do. That's not something easy to do. And it was even more challenging to write about it, because I'm looking right at my life that I've denied for most of my life, to start writing about. Wow, what the hell that's about. And she was there for me for all these stages of my life that I went through in the 1980s.
I was just going to jump in because it's something you said sparked another part of our experience together. I was thinking about your Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron, and when she talks about you as the whole thing. It's sort of what you were just saying, that one of the lessons of Buddhism and one of the parts of a meditation practice are, no longer stop doing what we all do, I think, which is to run away from the hard stuff. When we get scared, to run away from it, when we're feeling pain, to run away from it. And that practice is all about doing the opposite, sitting right in the middle of it. And I know that Pema talked a lot about you. It's hard for everybody, but to be doing it on death row, she said that she just remarked on all the courage that it took and takes.
Well, it was. But yeah, you know what? It was also, a lot of people don't get this. A lot of people don't really get this. But, it's what was hard about all this, and what is hard about it today is the fact that I'm innocent of being, convicted of the murder of Sergeant Burchfield. I feel sort of like, what? If I was guilty of something like that, then it would be a lot more easier. I'm imagining that it would be. But, every day here is another day that I shouldn't be here. So when you ask me to sit down and meditate on that, you want to say, what the fuck? What am I doing sitting down? I should be hollering and screaming, get me out of here. But I wasn't, I was caught, a lot of times I was trying to impress Melody that I'm able to sit down and, but I was never really impressing myself until I started meditating in a closer relationship to Buddhism. And that's when I really, really heard myself slow down, because now it was not about just meditating. It was about learning how to give yourself a journey, a type of meditation practice that went along with meditation. And those were very, very true rituals that changed my life, truly. Meditating didn't do it alone. Meditating didn't actually do all of it. Becoming a Buddhist did, and that was important,
Was that partly because of the community that came to you? Do you want to talk about your teacher Rinpoche and maybe Pema Chodron and some of the ways that it also gave you new relationships and new teachers?
Yeah. I mean, I met my teacher Shangdu Rinpoche right toward the end of my trial. Right toward the end. I think I had just got the death sentence. In fact, I was waiting to get sentenced to death when Melody brought into this. She brought me this real thin magazine and says, "Hey, ain't no sense of waiting, not doing anything. Here's this little,
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
once you hang out with it, you know. And I read through it, and I'm worried about my life and what this jury gonna do. You know, are they gonna sentence me to death, and what happens then? And then somewhere in that magazine it says life and relationship to death. You get this free book, you know, and anything free, that was the first good thing, and life and relationship to death, that was the second best thing. So all it took was a little postage stamp to ask for the book, you know, and I did. And, I was getting responses, and I was getting transcriptions of Rinpoche's teachings, and it just went from there, you know. It just went from there, and I can't tell you how fast it went or how slow it went, but I was tuned in, you know. I was time was not time to me like it used to be. You know, it was, you know, you have time to do something that you might not have time for if you wait. So everything was about, you know, taking time seriously. You know, taking time to be more progressive, more involved, more engaged. And that's how time just flew by. Years flew by. And yes, I thought about getting out, but I also thought about there's a lot of things you can do before you get out. And I got locked into that, you know, and I've been locked into that ever since, you know. So that's how that went.
And two things come to mind. One of them is kind of the title of one of your books, Finding Freedom, is how do you find freedom when you're locked up in a cage, you know, your whole adult life? And then the other thing is, there's a way a lot of times white people getting interested in Buddhism think about what can it do for me. But, and you're probably too modest to talk about this, maybe David can, that it's also become, you know, a means for you to become a person who can help a lot of other people in San Quentin. And you've prevented suicides and violence and all kinds of stuff. And both of those things I think would be really interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't know, David, you want to talk about that? Because I told you all about it.
David, sing his praises, because he's not gonna.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had mentioned Pamela Krasny earlier and how she talked to me about Jarvis, about you, Jarvis, and I was, you know, he's innocent on death row. Well, was he really? She talked about you, and Anipama talked about you, and other of your friends, Melody Chavez, talked about you as this really sort of a remarkable person, in some ways enlightened as a person. And I was skeptical, I was cynical, and I did a lot of research. And what I found out is that not only did you, I know, change the lives of people through your writing, through the story Scars that you were talking about, through Finding Freedom, and later your book, That Bird Has My Wings. But I was able to talk to people in prison who told me remarkable stories about you doing things that people in prison do not do. There's a code, there's a culture there. You don't intervene. The stories are, you know, I tell many of them. There's a story about this poor kid who came in, and he was gay, and he was going to be potentially murdered because of the prison culture. That was part of the code, I guess. And you found a way to intervene, but in a way that you also protected the dignity of the men who were going to be perpetrating this crime. So you not only did you save this guy's life, but you also saved these men from getting in big trouble. And another story that just comes to mind really quickly is the story that is even the most remarkable of all, is when a guard, a correctional officer, told me about a time that about a time in his life when he was so bleak that he was contemplating killing himself, and his relationship with you changed his demeanor. It made him appreciate his family in a new way, and it also made him realize that his job in San Quentin went from one that he was locking people up in cages, and these people were to be dismissed, to an opportunity to connect with people and to help people who were in trouble. So stories like that are, I think it just shows. It shows about what kind of person you are. I love quickly the story about, I mentioned Finding Freedom, and Rebecca did. When the book came out, it circulated widely and it went all over the world. But my favorite story is that in Watts in Southern California, not too far from where you grew up, Finding Freedom was the most stolen book out of the local library.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can tell you. Well, I can tell you one story that's similar to what you just said. I think, I've gotten a lot of good responses from Finding Freedom, and a lot of people are people who have been fortunate, but they have not understood how fortunate until they read Finding Freedom, or just people who were teachers or counselors or, just those kind of people. And they were good letters, and I responded to them, but I had gotten one letter, and it makes me cry even today when I think about it.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Where a librarian wrote me, and she says, I've been a librarian for almost 20-something years, and I am, in one of the kind of neighborhoods you grew up in, and I've never, ever, since being a librarian, had anyone steal a book out of this library. But you were the first person who I know who a child came in here, a teenager came in, and I seen him take your book and put it under his coat and run out.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
And I've never seen that before,
Yeah.
That was the biggest compliment I ever had. That
Jarvis,
compliment there really, really came home to me. That I was able to be of benefit to more people than I had imagined. And I think about that story all the time.
I'm so glad the librarian saw him as someone who really wanted a book that badly rather than seeing him as a thief.
Yeah, he actually stole it. Check it out. He actually stole the book. Now, I would never have stole the book out of a library. No,
Jarvis, I know
that would never been me. That never would have been me. That was not my script.
Okay, I think they just cut him off. He's probably going to call back. David, what were you talking about? So we're now, everyone listening and the other two of us in this conversation are now also locked into how the prison phone system works, and we're just going to bear with it in this tiny way, the way that he's done all these decades. David, did you want to talk a bit more about some of the stuff you wrote about while we wait for him to call back?
Sure. The phone cutting off is just a great example of the lack of control that Jarvis has had in his life. He's at the mercy of the prison system. And I would go visit him sometimes, and I couldn't get in because there was a lockdown.
This is Global Tel Link. You have a prepaid call from
Jarvis.
An inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Someone, Jarvis, is making some money off of this because the GTL, the prison phone system. I know that it's really unfortunate that it costs so much for prisoners to call their families to talk about. I know that during this COVID thing, you've talked about the fact that there's this pandemic going on and everybody's worried about their families, and it's just this draconian system there that makes it so hard for people to be reassured to connect with their families.
It is, and you have to understand that most people on death row, and that's where I'm at, are people of color. And the more you hear about people of color dying a lot faster than white folk, you become more concerned. So you're looking at it from a whole new different perspective. You're hearing about, you know, how people of color is not being treated as fast and being responded to as fast as white folks. That really resonated, you know, and it still does today, you know, because you know, a lot of us, well, not a lot, but I know some people still have their grandmothers, you know, and I know they have their mothers, sisters and brothers, and we're all concerned about that, you know, and it's just something that, you know, you really want to think that, you know, it would not be your family, but, you know, who knows, you know. And it's still a concern today, and I am so surprised, and I feel like I think that a lot of guys here are lucky that they are given free phone calls, and, you know, not only are they hearing from their families, and their families are hearing from us, we are making greater communications with them, and that controls a lot of what else goes on in San Quentin, you know. Our relationships to being on the outside. You know, if we lose those relationships, then we turn inward and we look at the worstest part of us. And that is a lot of violence, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. So as long as we're communicating with our families, that's an outlet to say, and hear someone say, we care about you and we want you out and we love you. Those are important messages, no matter where you're at, on death row, anywhere in the system. So that is one of the things that, you know, by having this tragedy, you know, other things are capable of happening, you know, and they are happening. And I hear people all the time talk about. I've talked to my auntie, you know, and I've talked to my niece. They can't afford to put the GTO line and pay for a lot of these phone calls. So, you know, they never got a chance to hear their voices. They never had a chance to hear what each other sound like, you know, and it's making a big difference. You know, it's making a huge difference, and I am so happy to see that.
Are you saying that they're making calls free while the pandemic is on?
Yeah, they're free calls. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're free calls, and
I didn't know
they
that.
get them on they get them on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and they started this right at the beginning of this pandemic, and it's doing a lot of things, man. I never thought I can.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
First, I never thought there were so many people who were not connected to their families. You know, I never thought, you don't know that. You don't look for that. You know? But when you hear the stories because they've communicated with families, you realize that, you know what, I didn't know that he even had two daughters, you know, or that something else, you know, was going on. And it's a great feeling, man. It's like, wow, you know, what a free phone call did for me to find out that I have two daughters. You know, I'm thinking about one person. I'm thinking about a person when I say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
It stunned me to know, this is something you know because you live with it, but I think it's about 75% of the 747 men on death row are people of color.
It's over a third Black in a state, California, that has a pretty small Black population. It's so disproportionate, and it's part of why the death penalty shouldn't exist. And a lot of people have been saying that because it's just so unequally applied. And you're so much more likely to get it if you're Black or brown. And It's funny because San Quentin is in Marin County, which is more than 75% white in a non-white majority state. And it means that sometimes people in San Quentin face these kind of very suburban white juries. I think you did, Jarvis, and it's just a weird arrangement. A lot of the other prisons, for better or worse, are out in these kind of poor rural areas that are also pretty white. But San Quentin is in the middle of one of the poshest parts of the USA, and it's just complicated. So.
Well, I guess when you try to make sense out of it, it gets even worse than that. What I'm thinking right now when you're saying that was that, if I were to ever really, go deep into that, those kind of numbers, it would just make me feel so depressed. Because, again, I wonder how many other people who are innocent that deals with this stuff, and, you got 700 something people on death row, and statistically, you got to have at least 30 people innocent. For many kind of poll you want to take, it just makes sense that you're not going to have 730-some people on death row and only one or two people who's been shown to be innocent. That don't make sense to me. And it never will.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the remarkable things about this moment is that defund the police has really caught fire as an idea, and a lot of people who weren't paying enough attention are thinking really hard about reforming the whole criminal justice system. And the focus right now is on policing. But of course, it's the way policing works that leads to so many arrests and convictions of people who maybe shouldn't have in the first place, that kind of feedback loops of a punitive system. And I would be really interesting to hear what it looks like to you from inside, because, from outside, it looks like there's more than 17 cities looking at various versions of defund the police. Confederate monuments are coming down, protests all over the country. And, Black Lives Matter has really sort of set the, stage for this radical rethinking of who we are and where we should be. And if you want to, I wonder how that looks from inside.
Well, I don't know. I can say for me, I'm still processing all of it because it's history being made here. There's so many things for me to process. From the inability of me to not be able to, watch for 9 minutes someone lose their life. The life is taken out of this person, and his pleas for, his mother can't breathe. It just felt like, this is what an execution looks like, but it's in the daytime and everyone's at home and we're all watching it, and it's not nighttime. It's right there in front of us. And I don't know anybody, who was able to watch that for 9 minutes. Even the most conservative of folks could not watch it for 9 minutes. So I'm thinking in my mind, how can they watch anybody be executed on death row if they can't watch something like that, And we've always said, if you're going to have the death penalty, have it in the daytime. Let everyone see it, Mm-hmm. And for a lot of us on death row, that's what we were thinking. This is what it looks like. This is me. This is what, this is a lot of other people on death row. This is what might happen to me. This is me being innocent and watching something like this, So it hit really, really hard for people on death row. Really hard. It was not something, and you didn't have to be black, people of color, white, it didn't make a difference. We all felt that. We all got scared of it. I know some of the people I know got scared of it. But more than anything else, we all saw all these different races, ethnic backgrounds, that was a surprise to me, and I think that brought something here too, and again, I'm processing it all, but it just seems to me that it has created a different kind of relationship with race relationships in prison. So I don't know. I don't know how far it's going to go, where it's going to go. But, Black Lives Matter do matter, and I think that they are getting our day, it showed what what people have been saying for many, many, many years, and Brother George Floyd gave the world a chance to see what it looks like. And, it's a tragedy. And things are still moving in that direction. People are still out there. The momentum is there. But where it's going to end up at, I have no idea. And I think a lot of people is wondering if this is going to take, if this is going to go to a place where we could all find our way to create a better justice system.
Rebecca, you're one of the great activists. You've written about this. Are you, when you see the people on the streets, when you see where things are going, are you optimistic, or do you feel like we're just going to forget?
I'm pretty excited because I see, first of all, real practical changes being made from the bill that Congresswoman Karen Bass, Black Congresswoman from, I think, South Central LA, introduced to reform the police, which I know a lot of my friends don't think is radical enough, but it's one that might actually pass Congress in Oakland and San Francisco and Berkeley, but also all across the country in Minneapolis and St. Louis, New York, etc., are all looking at, why do we send police to do all these things they're not trained to do, to be mental health counselors, social workers, rape counselors, etc.? Why do we have this system that doesn't work, that's really expensive, that terrorizes a lot of people?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
And so people are asking questions, and more people are asking questions. But also what makes me really hopeful is I see a younger generation of people who are really passionately tuned into racism and really passionately against it. And just the Confederate statues coming down that have been up for 100 years and all that kind of stuff. And this is something that happened with civil rights.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
That just these moments where what too many of us have tolerated becomes intolerable because we see it clearly the way that those for whom it was already intolerable saw it clearly. And so we're living, so it's it feels like a really big shift. And I've seen them, I saw it around gender with Me Too and the feminism of the last several years. I've seen it around economic injustice with Occupy Wall Street. I saw it around Native rights with Standing Rock. I've seen a lot of these transformative moments. And you can kind of measure in a mathematical way very direct consequences, but some of them are going to be incorrect. It's going to change minds and conversations and lives in ways we won't be able to measure, but that are really going to matter. And in a way that goes back to who Jarvis is. Here's this guy who's been in San Quentin since he was 19 or 20 and on death row all these years. And what has he done? Well, he's written a couple of books and that we know for sure, but he's I think a lot of what he's done that you were talking about, David, is all the things that didn't happen. The people who didn't commit suicide, the people who weren't murdered, the people who didn't commit violence, the people who didn't give in to despair, the people who didn't feel all alone. And your book is really exciting, partly because it does measure some of that. But, I think we always have to factor in the incalculable. And it sounds like he's getting to call back. We also never know how many times he gets these 15-minute...
Global Link. You have a prepaid call from
Jarvis,
an inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Hello.
Hey, you back?
Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back.
Round 3 in this
lady.
boxing match. You must be a little tired of her by now.
Yeah, I am. I am. She knows I am. So.
I wonder if we should talk about your case and the appeal that you have and where your life could go from here. And we had this this process a few years ago where we really thought you might get out, and it was really big.
Well, I mean, if you ask me, I'm very, very hopeful. But I've learned how to try to stay balanced, and not be swayed one way or the other on that. It's just one of those things that I've learned how to do that has kept my sanity going, is to say, you know what, I have to be prepared for whatever the outcome is. I cannot just fall to one side or the other. And I've been able to do that, and like it doesn't stay that way. You get a good conversation with your attorney and you just know the truth's going to come out, and you hear laws changing and you just know that may not be the case. So I just try to stay balanced, man. I mean, that's my trip, just okay.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to say you're getting out too many times, and make sure you don't tell yourself you're going to stay in too many times. And that's what I try to do.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And that's a good place to be, really. It is it's for me. And I wouldn't, and I would try to tell a lot of guys that too, you want to stay somewhere in the center of all that, because then you know that nothing should stop you from doing what you're doing, But yeah, that's where I'm at. I just want to stay in the center. I don't want to go nowhere. I don't want to go too fast, say I'm going to get out, and I damn sure don't want to even think about thinking that I'm not going to. But it's that's where I'm at. I need to be there.
Obviously your friends and supporters are hopeful about your appeal, and I really don't think it's naive or blind hope. I think that your case is such that the fact that you shouldn't be in prison, that your trial was a travesty, and that you are innocent, it's an incontrovertible place, and it's just a matter, in my opinion, of getting through this process that is excruciatingly slow. It's criminally slow to put someone on death row who's innocent and have it take you've been there now 35 years, I think 30 on death row, 22 years in solitary, as I mentioned, to take so long for your truth to be heard.
Man, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah. You once said to me something that just was so, it was just the truth, but also very sad, is that you've been in prison longer than you were outside.
Well, it's getting pretty close to a 2-to-1 ratio. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I hear everyone else says it's an awful long time, when somebody say, it's been 35 years, Jarvis, I say, damn, When I say it, it sort of feels like, okay, you know what? That's a long time, man, but you can't give up. There's just that extra sentence that go with that when I say it.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone else says it, it just seems unbelievable. So
I guess on the other side of that,
yeah.
not to just to say the truth again, it's not being Pollyannish. I think that this round of appeals, your case is going to be heard finally for the first time, and you're going to be walking out of there. Obviously, we hope and pray that happens. No guarantees in this world. We know the justice system is tough, but I have a lot of hope.
I just want to say something, because of course nobody knows his case better than Jarvis does. David's looked into it really deeply. I've plowed through some of the legal documents and talked to some of the people and stuff. And I was kind of naive before I looked at this. And most of us who know about criminal justice through TV and movies, when you see a case that's corrupt or rotten, it's like the clever detective, the clever attorney finds one rotten link in something that otherwise kind of holds together. And what's really stunning about what sent Jarvis to death row is that every link is rotten. And, evidence was destroyed, prison snitches lied, people contradicted themselves, people recanted, and, some of the narrative doesn't even make sense physically. And it's just like every single thing is rotten. And then just some of the ways that the racism of the judges who are like, well, you're a bad person anyway, so we don't mind that you got bad justice, is also just so rotten. It's like, because like your life was like a lot of bad stuff happened to you early and you ended up in the juvenile justice system. But, the way that they hold that against you is also part of the racism why more poor people and Black people are in prison and on death row. And it's just really, like I wasn't totally naive when I looked at that stuff, but it is a really rotten case. And I'm excited that now you've got really amazing lawyers who know what to do about it. And, I think that, your friend Pema Chodron wrote a book called Comfortable with Uncertainty. I think it's really what you describe about not assuming you're going to stay and not assuming you're going to get out sounds like a really good strategy. But, just the rottenness of the case and the strength of your legal team, makes me a little hopeful.
Well, I know now that the legal team I have, I feel very, very confident in. Kirkland and Ellis and that whole law firm is a law firm I feel very, very confident. I couldn't even imagine being more confident in this law firm than any other. I can't even imagine someone even, you can compare my aspirations to with this law firm. So, and the lawyers I have, I totally trust them, and it hasn't been the case for a lot of times I had my other attorneys. But, again, I'm very, very hopeful, but at the same time, I don't know, I don't know if I didn't have my practice, my Buddhist practice, that I could have even, sustained myself, knowing my case like I know it. And like you said, Rebecca, from top to bottom, it was, it's terrible. So, just having a Buddhist practice is one of those ways that actually says, you're in a good place when you don't know one way or the other. You're better off with just accepting whatever outcome it is to deal with whatever necessary for you to do next. But I am confident with Kirkland and Ellis and the lawyers I have. But, I just feel like, I'm in a better place if I just keep myself focused, being in the center, That's the safe way to be,
You mentioned, you were talking about, sort of the power of your practice to get through every single day. And I think one of the things that maybe it reminded me of this idea of we talked about, I came into this, I think you said the same thing, not really understanding that word that we always hear and we've heard our whole lives, the word karma. Does that mean, what does it mean? You get what you deserve. Well, as you asked, does that mean that all Black people have bad karma? And, Pema, when you spoke to Pema Chodron about it, I think that the conversation that you had went to this, really sort of interesting place, which was, no, that's not what karma is. Karma is that, how are we going to deal with where we are today? And the way that I think that was just so powerful when I heard you talk about it was this idea of waking up every day, asking that question, how am I going to spend today? Will I be asleep? Will I awake? What will I notice? Whose lives will I touch? We can all use that.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Well, you said it.
Yeah, I heard myself say it when I heard you. I heard myself say it when I heard you say it. That's why I said it's true, because I still believe that wholeheartedly. Yeah, I heard myself say that when you were saying it. That's a fact. So I was just, all right, yeah, that's what I believe, But yeah. But I also wonder how, people on the outside look at people on the inside, and the question of guilt and innocence is right there before them. I mean, what does that look like, Is there a lot of truth in what law enforcement says? How much does that weigh, against, the evidence, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I just think now that we have, I can be talking about my case as what I can be talking about my case, but what I was really thinking about is now that we have cameras, and people are taking pictures and filming things and recording things, and now law enforcement is back on their heels. I think that's what's showing the world, these murders, these shooting people in the back, and wasting somebody in the car with their babies, and in train stations, and it's just on and on and on. We are seeing these live acts of murder by law enforcement, and I just wonder, does that give question to what we believe law enforcement is all about? And I'm not saying every cop is a bad cop. I'm just saying we are witnessing a lot of stuff with these cameras, and I'm just worried about just curious about how people are looking at this now.
And I think a lot of people who, a lot of white people, a lot of people who weren't directly impacted by police brutality, fear of police in the criminal justice system, have, because of really great work by Black Lives Matter journalists and activists, really gotten over the idea that the police are reliable and we should trust them. And one of the really weird things that keeps happening is that the police tell stories that don't jibe with the video evidence, and you just sort of look at them and you're like, you just assume that your words
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And it just you just see people who assume that they are in control of the story no matter what the physical evidence is. They say this guy was running at me, but all the bullets are in his back, and which has happened here in San Francisco, happened with Walter Scott, and I think it was South Carolina, etc. And so, I think thanks to organizing and and cell phones, and and this whole making visible what happens that began with the Rodney King video back when handheld video was a big new thing. I think it's changing a lot, and this is part of why we're in this moment.
60 seconds remaining.
But I'm not going to use it for
that
60
lady.
seconds,
There's that
Jarvis.
lady again.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, there's that
yeah.
lady again. I know you got to be getting frustrated now. I mean, she's interrupting you too. So,
you know, I don't mind.
I mean, seriously, I do feel a little bit better now. You know what I mean? I do, because it's not just me. She's you know, she's interrupting Miss Rebecca Solnit. So that's a big thing, you know.
Well, she's now interrupting a whole broadcast program. So, you know, she's hit the big time.
Well, hey. She's big time now. And I feel good because we all know what it sounds like now.
Yeah, no, I think it's great for people to hear it. Anything else you want to say before they cut you off? And is this your last round?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Did we lose him?
I think so.
He's still there? Okay. David, I'm just, because, and it's funny because these phone calls where you get interrupted all the time, they constantly kind of break the flow. And of course, normally when you're doing a podcast or a broadcast, we're trying to make it all really flow a lot and stuff. And I think I like that this is real. This is what it's like to be in prison and try and have a conversation. You get disrupted constantly. But I'm just trying to think out loud. What else do you think people might want to know about Jarvis and his case, but also about the remarkable person he's come, the impact he's had, about the book you've written about him, and what?
Well, the case is, I wish I could say it was a slam dunk because it's so clear in my mind that he's innocent and shouldn't be there. But, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. As far as, I guess part of the reason that one of Jarvis's teachers, he mentioned the Rinpoche, who was his first Buddhist teacher, once said to him, we're all in prison and we all hold the key. And of course, when they said that to Jarvis, he was like, no. We are not all in prison. The guards are the ones who hold my keys. But he taught me over these years, the years that we hung out together in this cage, hours and hours, a couple hundred hours actually, and overall, that just as Jarvis has found a way, you mentioned his book, Finding Freedom, just as a way that he has found freedom. The lessons in his life, the lessons he impart are that we all can, and we all suffer in different ways. That's not to pretend that my suffering or anybody on the outside is the same as what it is like to be there with him. It is when I go in to see him, it is heartbreaking. It is.
This is Global Tel Link. You have a prepaid call from
Jarvis.
Yay.
An inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Hello?
Hey, welcome back. This is our last round because we're recording but we're glad to have you back.
Oh, okay, cool.
We're glad to have you back. And so, we have some questions from the audience and like people send in questions in advance. And can I ask you a few of these questions? And sorry, David.
Absolutely.
So here's one from a guy who writes, I've just returned from a stay at the federal prison at Lompoc, California. As a Buddhist myself, I found the hardest part of my practice was to have any empathy for the guards, the COs, correctional officers. They treat inmates, all inmates, like we are not human or at best not adults. I literally trembled when I saw that Bureau of Prison riot squads were brought into Washington, D.C. to bring order. It's got to be worse on death row. How do you move through this?
Wow, good question.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's a really, really good question. I think one of the things that got me looking at that is that when after writing Finding Freedom, the book, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years afterwards, I got a series of letters, and I think I still have those letters because they really was life-changing. They were life-changing for me. Just really life-changing experiences. And, they start off saying, I read your book in classroom, blah, blah, blah. But then they get to the part where, my father works where you at, and a lot of times I can relate to your story because he beats me up when he gets home, and me and my sister run to the back of the room when my father gets home, And it was not a lot, maybe 4 or 5 letters like that. But they all told me that, if you treat these guys really, really bad, then those kids might get abused, So I've always thought about that. I say, I can cuss this dude out right now and feel good about it, but I will always think about where's he taking that to, And the last thing I want him to do is leave here angry because, this is not a place where, everything cuts off once you leave the gates, It goes to work, it goes home with you. A lot of it goes home with you. It just has to, So I always think about that. I always think about what's going to happen if I cuss this guy out, if I get in his face, if we have a serious confrontation. What is he going to do when he leaves here? How many kids he might have.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Is he an alcoholic? I just felt so scared of what I might cause that I tend to just, try to find a peaceful way with myself to understand that I'm trying to help someone who I may not know, but I just tend to think that, I don't want no child and no teenager to get slapped around because of a guard's anger about how somebody in here treated him, So I always think about that. That's my tool, that's my wrench. That's what I use all the time to know that whatever I might say to someone is going to maybe be taken out on someone else, especially in an environment like this, So, guards tell me all the time, man, this is the biggest, divorce rate with law enforcement than anywhere else, So it just tells me that, this is not a place that you cannot cut off when you leave the gate. So I'm always thinking about that. I'm always thinking about what it is that I might be causing if I were to create the kind of tension that, may be taken out on someone else, So that's how I deal with my stuff,
Yeah.
I like to think that that's what we need to start thinking about for the people who are in prison is what do we want this guy or her to leave with, and that helps me. It really helps me because I feel like I'm protecting somebody. I know what it feels like to be protected as a child.
Or to be protected or unprotected.
No, I know what it is like to be protected as a child. I remember being taken away from my parents when I was really, really small, and what that did to protect me. And when I think about that, I know what it may be to another 7-year-old or another 5-year-old kid. My life experiences I learn from, as far as I can go back. I try to feel like, this can be used somewhere that helps someone else. So, that's what I said, who knows if this guard got a 5-year-old daughter, who's scared as hell when she hears the car drives up, So, yeah, I think about that, Rebecca. I do.
Thank you. That's a really deep answer. There's another question. Somebody says, I know rituals and routine are typically a big part of a Buddhist practice. Do you have a morning or evening routine? If so, what are they? And it's kind of a funny question because if Buddhists have a big, like routines, but so do prisons. And how do those two kind of mesh in your life or not?
Well, what I do is that I'm more of an engaged Buddhist. I feel like I do a whole lot of standing up. I like to be involved and get in between stuff and try to fix things or try to bring some common sense to things that I hear. So I'm not always sitting down. Sitting down is just sort of like going into a filling station and filling up your car. You sit there just so you can have the energy and the right intentions when you get up. But I don't sit for long. I just don't have that kind of thing in me. And that might be my flaw, but the truth is I just sit long enough so when I stand up, I can be a productive person around me, But just sitting there 8-9 hours, you're not going to get that from me. So that's my thing, Sometimes I sit for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, sometimes an hour, but I don't go in those states of mind where you're sitting there for 15 hours. No, it's not happening. So that's pretty much the answer to that question.
Thank you. They're gonna cut you off at some point, and we're gonna wrap up this program at some point. And instead of you just getting cut off the way they usually cut off, I wanted to give you a chance to decide how you wanted to close out, and whether it's asking David a question or anything else you want to say. This is going to be heard by tens of thousands of people, so anything you want to tell the general public, anything you're thinking about right now.
No, I'm good. I think that this was a very, very interesting discussion for me, and I'm glad to be able to sit here with you guys and hear the questions and be of some benefit to someone else that might be listening to us, and that's a great thing for me. So I just thank everybody who's listening, and I definitely would like to say to everybody to stay safe, because we all need to be safe right now, and that's basically it.
Well, and we're not throwing you out of the room or anything, but thank you so much for that. And David, I wonder if you have anything you want to ask Jarvis or anything else that comes up right now.
Well, I guess the first thing is to say, first of all, to you, Rebecca, thank you. But Jarvis, it's just been amazing to have you here with us. I mean, we've spent so much time talking in that small cage in the visiting room, or even before that, behind the sheet of glass between us. And the idea that your voice can come out and be part of a conversation that is being heard, across the country, even across the world, is it's extraordinary. So, thank you. And I feel like I guess I just really have a sense of gratitude for this whole experience, because I didn't come into it thinking it was going to have an impact on my life, and it has, and you have. So I'm grateful.
I want to say the same thing.
Right on, man.
I want to say the same thing. I kind of knew from reading Melody's book, Altar in the Streets, that had such a big influence on me, that if I came in to see Jarvis as a journalist, I was going to be sticking around as a friend. And it's been, I feel sort of embarrassed to say how much fun we have talking on the phone, because you are not in a fun place.
Yeah, we do. It is. I don't know how that happens, but we do have a lot of fun talking. I feel like, and I catch you in some of the most fun places,
Well, and also I feel like if I can make you laugh, that's the best I can do, and our senses of humor totally jive. But it's a big part of my life, and I'm really grateful to know you, and it's also sometimes incredibly humiliating. Once Jarvis called me up and said, "How are you?" And I'm like wallowing in my little rich white lady problems. How are you? And I remember that. Well, there's probably more than one time like that. It does put one's life in context. I remember, I think one of the first times I came to see you, you were like, what are you going to do after this? And I was like, I think I'm going to go get tacos. And you said, being able to go get tacos, that's freedom. So, not that you exist as a sort of... you
remember that, huh? You remember that, huh?
Well, I think partly because I wrote it down and I probably reread it, but I do remember that, one of those first times. So, but, I feel really lucky to know you, and there's also this kind of wonderful group of people like Melody and David and, formerly Pamela, still her husband, around you. And one of the things I think that's remarkable about you is that you've made this really big, rich, interesting life out of the most unpromising circumstances. You've written books, you've formed deep friendships, you've followed a Buddhist path, you've taken a deep interest in the world, and, and just that, and just the ways that you've worked with the tiny amount of freedom they've given you to make the best thing that you can is really pretty staggering.
Pema Chodron once said to me, I asked her, it's such a, she's this Buddhist nun and this very sensitive person. She's this extraordinary person. And I asked her, doesn't it break your heart every time you leave Jarvis, when you leave the prison, amid all that suffering, knowing he's going back to his cell, to the tear? And she looked at me like I was, what was wrong with me for asking that question? She said, are you kidding? We have so much fun. I feel great. It's uplifting when I leave.
Jarvis, you stand accused of being fun.
Hey, you know what? I love her so much, and we do have fun. And whenever a lot of people visit me, it's just a good time that I just get a chance to have. I don't know what makes it work. It just happens.
Well, that might be a great place for all of us to wrap it up. So thank you so much. We love you. Be well. Talk to you really soon. And thank you, David.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both.
Much love.